Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden Williams here, and I'm delighted to say that today I'm joined by Carlos Huber, who is the fragrance developer and founder at Arquiste. Hi, Carlos. How are you?
Hi, Hayden. I'm good. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for doing this in your morning in New York. You've got Chorizo the dog. I don't. Is Chorizo still there?
He's still here.
Here he
There we
is,
go.
special special guest Chorizo,
My
and
sidekick. Yeah.
it's a first on the podcast to have a dog companion, and I love it. I wish every guest had a dog with them. But we were talking before we met last month in London. There was a brilliant event that Fiole put on, which paired cocktails with Arquiste fragrances, and you kindly introduced. I knew some of the fragrances I'd experienced Sydney Rockpool before, which we'll talk about all the fragrances a bit later. But Sydney Rockpool I knew, Architects Club I knew, but I didn't know the full range of fragrances. And this event was a great way of pairing the Arquiste fragrances with appropriate cocktails. And we
Yeah.
had the pleasure and privilege of Carlos sort of talking us through some of the new fragrances and introducing them with an accompanying cocktail. So it kind of as the evening went on, we were a bit slightly merrier, but it was
Yeah.
brilliant. So it was really great to experience some of the new fragrances. But I guess that's a big part of your role anyway, isn't it? Just sort of traveling around and evangelizing about the brand, and I guess you get to see a lot of the world that way.
Yes, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my
Do
favorite
you?
things about it. It's one of the parts I think that actually convinced me and in a way kind of like entrapped me into this like role and this job. Because yes, it's allowed me to see a lot of like different places in the world, but not beyond that. It's allowed me to have like a lot of very cool, very close interactions with people in these places. Because it's
Yeah,
not just traveling like a tourist to another destination, getting there, consuming whatever you do, and then like going out. I'm there with people from the place. I do a lot of store events. I
yeah,
meet the people. We talk about fragrance, but we talk about life as well, about where we're from. I have relationships with stores and distributors, and we go out for lunch or dinner and we travel together. So it creates really a lot of just opportunities for exchange.
yeah. And
And that's what's really fun about traveling.
I bet. I mean, that part of it to me, just sort of getting to, as you say, experience different parts of the world, but through the job that you do and through the lens of
Yeah.
getting to see it with local people. But also, I think it's not as though you're. This is no disrespect to someone who sells stationery or something, but you're not going around selling photocopier paper.
No.
You're
Yeah.
you're talking about something that people have a real passion
Yeah.
for and can connect with on a real molecular level, and you're talking about creative things. So I can only tell you, experiencing it from the side of a journalist, or I'm lucky enough to occasionally get invited to these things. But it's always such a pleasure to meet anyone associated with fragrance, and particularly brand founders and perfumers, because invariably they're always such interesting people and have got so much to talk about. And I love hearing about the stories behind each fragrance, or that's partly why I do this podcast. Finding out what people's motivations are to do what they do. But I mean, we'll definitely talk a lot more about Arquiste and the brand, and what's coming up this year. But I'd love to find out, first of all, I mean, people might detect that you're from Mexico originally.
Yes.
And
I'm
is it
born
Mexico
and raised.
City?
I'm born and raised in Mexico City. My family's all there. I'm actually second generation Mexican. My grandfather, from my dad's side, arrived in Mexico in the 20s from Poland, and
Right.
my grandmother's of Ukrainian and Lithuanian origin. And then
Okay.
on my mom's side of the family, there's also some Polish there, and
Right.
then Greece and Turkey, which is like a very interesting mix of
Yeah.
people that are very let's say effusive and
Yeah. Passionate.
Mediterranean, and then others that are a little bit more northern and a bit more closed off and
Yeah.
reserved.
And you were
So
saying that
uh,
you went to Poland recently and got to see
yeah,
where your grandfather was from.
Yes, and you know what? Like that's an I mean that this ties in with what we were discussing about like fragrance and travel. And I was lucky to go to Poland now to do some fragrance events with a wonderful perfume store there called Galilu, that has several outposts in Warsaw and Krakow. And I was in Warsaw mostly, and my grandfather's town is an hour out of outside of Warsaw. And before that, I was a little bit, um, kind of like a little bit, had some reservations about what that experience in Poland might be like. Not so
Mm,
much like the experience with the store, but like visiting my grandfather's hometown. I thought
yeah.
it may be a little bleak, a little sad. It's kind of like a sad story how they left.
Mm.
Um, it's been like a kind of like a chip on our shoulders that like they had to leave Poland in not such happy situation.
Did they
And then
leave? Did they leave sort of between the wars? Then did you say
yes,
twenties? Yeah.
yes, and there was there were a lot of conflicts with Russia at the time.
Mm,
So they left because of that. There were a lot of pogroms in the
right.
region, um, and after one where literally Cossacks came into their house, and my great grandmother had to like hide my grandfather in the like in the kitchen in the put him in the inside the oven,
My
obviously
God.
off, so that they wouldn't like just like steal him away.
Yeah.
That's when my great grandfather decided to like leave.
And so
And
why Mexico, Carlos?
I don't know exactly what brought my family there, but my great grandfather was one of many siblings, and
Mm,
little by little they all started like emigrating and coming to Mexico.
yeah.
And so the entire kind of like family ended up like settling in Mexico.
Right.
And I think it was a situation of like one person said, "Hey, it's nice over here, come over,"
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the
Come.
rest started like coming.
Yeah.
And my grandfather always like raised us with this incredible gratitude and pride in being Mexican.
Mm,
The way he said it, he was said like, you Mexico gave us everything when we came, you are
yeah.
very lucky to be Mexican, you should always be very proud of that.
Yeah.
And I that really kind of like was very special to me. So now when I went to Poland, it was really special to see, where the house where he was born and all that, and the town, and kind of like almost I brought back my Mexican passport and
Yeah.
almost had it just in my pocket with me to sort of like honor that kind of part of my history.
Yeah.
And but what was really nice, and going back to perfume, and the reason why this visit was so special and why I feel very, very lucky, is that I came to Poland with already like incredible support and like just a situation where I was gonna feel valued,
Mm,
acknowledged. I was gonna feel the warmth and the love, let's say, and I was gonna not feel alone in that
yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And it was really lovely because I think it completely changed my idea of Poland, of what I thought my experience was going to be. Not that I thought people were not going to be kind, but I just thought I might feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And in the end, I ended up feeling completely the opposite. I felt completely just indulged by how people were so sweet and so lovely
Yeah.
and incredibly touched. So that was a really, really, really special trip. Probably one of the most I've ever taken.
That sounds incredible. And I can imagine reconnecting with a sort of birthland in a way that it can be.
Yeah,
I imagine that's
making
quite
peace with it
nourishing.
in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
finding some roots and
yeah.
yeah.
And it's important, because we don't have anyone like there anymore.
Mm,
There's no active connection anymore. So for me to do that was like I think a very special treat. I think I was very lucky. I spoke, of course, to my family at the time, and my dad said like, I don't know, this is very special that you're the first one to come back,
yeah.
and I
Yeah.
hope that like just that you take that in your life, and that it does something positive, of course. But yeah, I think perfume, it's lovely because people have like really emotional reactions and really emotional um, kind of opinions and takes on what fragrance does and how it can affect our day. Um, I know for me, I think actually I've become more and more. I don't want to say emotionally dependent on fragrance, on scent, but I'm
I know
just
what you
a
mean
lot
there.
more aware and more. I'm just more aware of like the joy it brings me.
Yeah,
So
me
I
too. Yeah,
literally use it. It's a tool for me to kind of
yeah,
like shape my day, to like decide what I want to wear that day, how do I want to feel, what do I want to kind of like think of even,
yeah,
because I like thinking about the ingredients, where they come from, what's the story behind them.
yeah,
I like it's like opening a book and saying like, today I want to read
yeah.
about this.
Oh, it's such a joy, isn't it? And I wonder in terms of growing up in Mexico and sort of bringing it to fragrance. I mean, do you think that Mexico played a role in your interest in? We're going to talk about other things that you've done, but
Yeah,
in terms of your interest in the world of fragrance and smells around you, do you think Mexico's played a part in that?
100%. I
Yeah,
mean, Mexico is just sort of like so vibrant and so colorful,
yeah.
not only visually but like olfactively,
Temperament and everything.
temperament, and
Yeah,
like just the music, the just explosion of everything. It's a really beautiful, beautiful, incredible part of the world, and I think that's also why I love it so much. I still see kind of like the wonder in kind of like the way that my grandparents, when they came to Mexico, and their eyes must have been like, what is this? I still
yeah.
see it that way. I still have a little bit of a disconnect, in the sense
Mm.
that like, I feel very much I'm from there, but I can also see stuff as an outsider.
Yeah, because you
And I
spend
think
most of your time in New York now, right?
I
Or as
spent
a
half of
home.
my life in New York now.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, half of my life outside of Mexico for sure.
yeah.
A few years in Europe, and then after that, New York. And I don't
Do you
know.
have a home? Do you have a home in Mexico now?
I do.
Yeah.
We have a home in the Yucatan, in Merida, which is
Mm,
a beautiful town. It's quite colonial. It's in the inland. It's 45 minutes from the coast, and we're close to the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. So
lovely.
it's a very nice, very quiet. People are like the kindest,
Mm,
and it's a nice part of Mexico to kind of go and
kick
contrast
back.
with New
Yeah,
York.
yeah.
Yeah,
I bet. I
yeah.
bet. And maybe some people don't know in terms of your background, Carlos, that you, in terms of education and further education, you studied architecture and history and
Yeah.
historical restoration. Is that right?
I think history has always been my number one interest. Um, and through that, the arts. And when I was thinking of like what I wanted to study, for, in my professional life, I thought that architecture was basically the best way to kind of do a very all encompassing uh, curriculum.
Mm,
I was going to study, of course, like history of architecture. I was going to study a little bit of engineering. I was going to be able to like design and draft, and um, learn a lot about also sort of like government policy, and like there's a lot of things that are like have to do with like architecture, of course. So, and I love architecture. Architecture is still like a super big like passion of mine. and and then after finishing architecture, and I've worked a lot in architecture. I worked in Spain with a couple of like architects in Ibiza and in Bilbao. um, I did like a little bit of restoration with an architect in Ibiza. Then after that, I worked with a larger firm in Bilbao. I've worked with urban planners as well. Then I moved to back to Mexico. I worked with a couple of construction companies, and kind of gain more experience in construction.
right,
And then I moved to New York, and I started my studies in historic preservation, um, which is architectural conservation.
right. You were at
And
Columbia, were you?
I was at Columbia. That was a
Yeah.
2-year program. And after that, I work with what was my thesis advisor, and is architect and artist Jorge Otero Pailos. And I worked on a couple of basically preservation art installations with him, both in Italy. And then I started a job at Ralph Lauren in store development.
Oh, did you?
So the corporate offices of Ralph Lauren here in New York, of course, they do everything in house, and they have a full architecture design studio in house that designs all their flagships and all their
Right. Yeah.
stores. So having experience in what's it called, in historic preservation, was really good for them because, of course, all their flagships are meant to look old
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like historic,
Yeah.
and they do wonderful like restoration projects for most of them. I mean, in some cases they're building something new, but in most cases they're
Yeah.
coming into
Sometimes they're original buildings. Yeah.
exactly and restoring them. So I was there for a couple of years, and around that time, and this is also very much like very New York, and that's why I also got the job at Ralph Lauren. I thought that was something unique that I was not going to be able to do anywhere else except New York.
Mm.
That kind of crossroads between fashion and architecture, I thought that was very interesting and
Yeah.
very
What an
unique.
amazing role.
But this being New York as well, at some point, just socially going out, I met a couple of perfumers, and that's when I started kind of like talking about my interest in fragrance.
Right.
And I had met back in Mexico, I had a friend who was an evaluator, a fragrance evaluator, which, as you know, is like almost like a sommelier in
Yes.
fragrance.
Yeah.
They're the people that like guide the development process
Yeah.
and kind
And
of
kind of
like
interpret in the middle, you know?
mediators
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
between the client and the perfumer. So I had a friend who was an evaluator, and then I met Jan Vanier, perfumer from Givaudan in New
Yep.
York, and later, and we became good friends. And both of them then introduced me to Rodrigo Flores, which eventually became my mentor and teacher, and offered to give me classes. Really, after a lot of nagging from me, asking him about fragrance and sources and references, and just he basically one day said like, well, if you're really serious about it, I will teach you, but you got to take this serious. We're going to have
Yeah.
homework. You're going to come every week, and you'll take me to dinner afterwards.
Nice.
And it was amazing because, of course, learning from people like that is just like it's a gift you don't
Yeah.
think about twice.
I only met Rodrigo once, but I can totally imagine he would be an incredible teacher because he has so much, well, obviously a wealth of knowledge, but a hugely passionate, vibrant character and a lot of fun. I mean, I sat with him for an hour and he was talking about some of his fragrances, but it was such a fun hour because he's hilarious, isn't he? He's like a really kind
He's
of
hilarious,
like a force of nature.
but truly he is so passionate about fragrance in a very good way, not in a strange way at all. It's like a very healthy, beautiful like passion around it that is like infectious. It's like completely
Yeah,
contagious. You want to be a part of that.
yeah,
um so that's how I kind of like started this adventure in fragrance. I started taking classes with him, and I would discuss, especially a lot of history, because history was something that interested the both of us. And so I would ask him, hey, what about in this era? What would have been like formulas in this era? And he would basically show me. He's like, well,
right,
this was a very famous formula at that time. Everything is archived in the Osmothèque in Versailles. Um, and I would learn a lot about like perfume history. And that's when, one day I asked him like, what if we actually like recreated one of these old formulas? And he said something really really interesting that I think is kind of the key and part of the core kind of concept of Arquiste. He said, if we were to recreate an old formula, you'd be disappointed,
right,
because perfumery has evolved so much, and we have so much to be grateful for, with a lot of incredible new raw materials, synthetics, and just better quality extractions,
yeah,
that if you were to smell something from the 18th century, you would have said, well, it's a
it's
nice
okay.
little
Yeah,
lily of the valley, a little nice
yeah,
little rose, nice little violet, whatever. And I think that's then what made me think, well, maybe we don't, maybe these old formulas, we use them as ingredients. or accords,
Right.
and then we use them as colors in a much more elaborate picture.
Yeah.
So then that created kind of like the idea of restoring a moment in time, and maybe the cosmetic formulas from the era are part of the ingredients, part of the story, but not the full story. Then you bring in the landscape, the botanical
Yeah.
elements, the construction materials, and then you can recreate really like this entire moment happening around you. And rather than smell like, Marie Antoinette, then Marie Antoinette is next to you, but you also have all
Yeah.
these other things, and you smell like you.
You smell like you. I
And
remember,
that's
yeah,
much more
when,
interesting.
yeah, when we met, I was really struck by that idea because obviously from your background in historical restoration and architecture and looking at some of the fragrances, I urge people to have a look on the website. But yeah, each different fragrance has a kind of historical context, and so there's Lord de Louis, which is one of the
Yeah,
newer ones, isn't it? And it's kind of Louis XIV, and it's 17th century France, and there's a whole story and a real sense of place. But I remember you saying when we met, it's not, these aren't supposed to be just seen through the lens of that particular time. You kind of add yourself to it and bring a
yeah.
sense of modernity as well. It's not kind of stuck in a certain moment, is it? Which I think, yeah, that really resonated with me.
Well, there was a conscious decision at some point, like, is this an art project or is this a brand?
Yeah, a
You know, is
commercial
this
entity.
gonna
Yeah.
where is this going to be featured? Is it going to be featured in a museum or a gallery, or is this going to be featured in a store where people are consuming a product?
Mm,
I think we needed to decide, like, well, if it's a product, then we have to make certain decisions or concessions, let's say,
yeah,
um, which I think also are for me more interesting than just creating something that is an exact reproduction, but that you smell it, you don't necessarily connect with it. It's not something you want to wear, and you brush it aside. I think
mm,
there's something really interesting about trying to like make it relevant for our own time and trying to modernize it. It's also kind of like what I learned in preservation and architecture about, in a way, like adaptive reuse.
yeah,
It's great to like restore an old building, and if you can like allow, or the situation allows for it to be exactly as it used to be, and it still has that sense of currency, of like of relevance, great. If you need to do something to modernize it and to make it significant again, and that needs to change, then the story itself is telling you that change was necessary. And
totally.
I
And
think that's important with fragrance.
I think as you described there is almost that, there's one thing which is a kind of academic exercise which has a validity and is interesting, but I think as you said there, farm, what you're creating is a brand that's got commercial, excuse me,
Yeah,
commercial appeal and could potentially reach a far wider audience with
right.
with what you're doing. But I think, but at the same time, looking at the sort of detail you go into in terms of the historical kind of place and the way, all the different eras that you're talking about and the different historical figures, there's a real sort of granular detail. There's quite a lot of detail there, and you can
Yeah.
tell your love and passion for that kind of that side of things, which I think, for someone who can experience the perfume, it's all extra information, and it all
Yeah,
adds to the story, I think.
it adds to it, and it also sort of like keeps it uh just interesting. It's almost like a relationship. You need
Yeah,
to keep it interesting. You need to keep having little hooks to bring people back. And I think it's important. I think the fragrances that I connect with the most are not just the ones that smell good on me and that I think, well, that's also great. Like, I want to find out more about it. It needs to have like a good story. That's
yeah,
definitely very important for me.
yeah, me
Um,
too.
I don't like it when we sacrifice that for packaging. We sacrifice that for marketing. We sacrifice uh, because I think it's also a disservice to the perfumers. Perfumers don't create things in a vacuum. There's
No,
always a story
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
uh, that that inspired them, that made them come up with this particular formula. And I think those stories are wonderful. They may be, some may be historic, some may not at all, but I think it's something to celebrate.
I totally agree. Well, look, we're going to talk a little bit more later about, we'll certainly touch on Arquiste and some of the new fragrances that are coming. But as always, I love to find out from my guest about some of the products that they use in their morning and evening routine, just
Yeah,
because I don't know, I feel like sometimes it's information that we don't get from other places. And I certainly find it insightful and instructive to just get some tips on products that work for different guests. And as always, some guests have quite a tight little edit of products that they use, and some are kind of more extensive. So I wonder, with you, Carlos, what kind of routine do you have in the morning and the evening in terms of products and things that are on your
I'm
bathroom
I'm
shelf?
100% a person of routine and
Are
habit.
you? Yeah.
100%. I'm
So the same
extremely,
things every time.
yes, very
Yeah.
much. I find a lot of comfort in that. I may tweak things here and there. I may change a few things here and there for the sake of just not staying, not being bored. But
Yeah.
um, but I have my things. I mean, the minute I wake up, I go to wash my face, basically, just like throw some cold water,
Yeah.
wash my face with soap, and then I use this. I like this water. I think it's called like a beauty water, something from a brand called Mary Allen,
Okay. I don't know that one.
and it's like it's just a sort of like a water with like it has like a rose essential oil and other
Hmm.
sort of like botanicals, and it just like smells very fresh. I guess it's almost like a toner.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's like a toner in a way, um, and I just like spray that on my face, and that kind of like adds helps me like kind of wake up. Sometimes I also grab literally an ice cube and I just run it through my face,
Oh, do you?
and yeah, and
Hmm.
I just feel it like it sort of like
Sort of tightens you
tightens
up a bit. Yeah.
everything, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and just again gives like that feeling of like freshness.
Yeah.
Um, Next important thing is a cup of coffee.
Love it.
Super important.
How do you take it? What's your coffee?
I take it with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of non-fat milk.
Gotcha.
I'm not a purist, unfortunately.
Good.
I've tried to do the all black coffee or all black espressos and all that, and at the end of the day, I need a little bit of sugar and a little bit of
Yeah.
milk in there.
I've been to coffee shops sometimes where they're so kind of purist about it that they don't have sugar anywhere, and you have to ask for it, and they kind of look down their nose at you because you want to put milk or sugar in, and it kind of annoys me. Like,
Yeah.
I like good coffee, but I want to have it my way.
Oh, for sure, for sure, for sure. Um, and then there's a very good Italian coffee place nearby that recently opened, and every once in a while I'll treat myself and go take my dog for a walk and get like a cappuccino there, and then come back to the
Nice,
office and
nice.
start my day. But I love that. I also have from the same brand, Mary Ellen. They have like just a face oil that is really nice, and just
Right.
like use a couple of drops on that and put it on my face, and
Right.
that's how I kind of handle my day.
Do you use moisturizers and things? Yep.
That I like as well, also from Mary Ellen. I like the brand a lot. I use that during the day, and then in the evening I use a moisturizer from a brand, American brand called Beekman,
Okay. I don't know that one
um,
either. That's
and
new
that's
to
what I
me.
use in the evening mostly. Or I'll do sort of like a more sort of like dense serum if it's like very dry out and I want
Mm.
something a little
And
deeper.
what about shaving, Carlos? Do
Shaving,
you keep it sort of fairly? Do you keep a bit of stubble all the time, or
I usually have a little bit of a beard,
yeah,
yeah. But I always shave because I always like clean this up. For example, the neck,
yeah,
and then every once in a while I also shave my head.
okay,
Usually I just like trim it down to zero, but like I'll like shave it as well. And I use the Art of Shaving sandalwood shaving cream,
great,
which I
yeah,
love,
that's a
and I
good
love the
brand,
smell. And
yeah,
then I have a Harry's razor, which is kind of like my preferred
yeah,
razor.
yeah,
And
great. And I suppose fragrance is a tricky one, right? Because you're obviously working on new things and evaluating and developing products. So
Yeah.
do you tend to not put fragrance on and wait to see what happens at the office?
No, if I know that I have an evaluation day, then if I'm going to have a smelling session that day, I won't spray anything.
Yeah,
And I'll also be very mindful of even whatever I put on my face or my body, make sure that it has no scent.
yeah,
Um, if that's the case, if I'm doing more like admin work here in my home office, then actually fragrance is a very big part of my day.
yeah.
Um, Sometimes I'm either like, first of all, when I wake up, another thing that I do right after, like, washing my face, is I'll spray a fragrance on.
Oh, will you
And
that
it's
early?
almost sort of like, okay, this morning is starting with this.
Yeah,
And I just like sort of like smelling those notes, like just waking my nose up. I usually tend to go for something very, very fresh.
hmm,
I spray a lot of like Le Trog Aqua in the morning, or even L'Or de Louis as well. I
yeah.
really like it. Um,
I love that one.
and I have also like a fragrance collection of my own that is not Arquiste, that are just nostalgic, beautiful scents that
Yeah,
I
I was
love.
going to say, do you sort of venture outside of the Arquiste world?
Yeah, of course. I love fragrance, all fragrance. I love Arquiste, and of course, like I wear most of that just because even wearing something out, it is some important. If people say something, if I receive a compliment, if I don't receive any compliments, like that's all information for me that I need
Yeah,
to take into
yeah,
account.
absolutely.
So
Well,
every
that's
time
really
I go
interesting.
out, most of the times I'm wearing something from Arquiste, but
Mm.
at home is another story. And I'll wear both, and through the day I'll wear different things. Like
Yeah,
I also really, I'll wear something in the morning, then after, I go work out, I shower, then I'll wear the fragrance of the day for me.
I love it.
Um, and Yeah, but I'll usually in the morning I'll reach for something very fresh. My favorite outside of my brand for that is the Chanel Platinum Egoiste.
Oh, that's good.
There's something about that. It is a
Yeah.
completely nostalgic scent for me. It smells like a blast from the past. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know who it
Mm.
reminds me of or what exactly, but it is kind of almost part of my history. And so that's something that I really reach for in the mornings. And then I'll move on to something like a L'Or de Louis for the day, which I love because it has like that sort of like combination of crisp, orange blossom, fresh, and then like a more sort of deeper honey, wood, cade oil, this like smokiness in the back that is more sophisticated. But yeah, fragrance is like a huge part in there. It's like a marker through my day. Even what candle do I light? When I'm working, I'll light a
Right.
candle and it'll be a
Yeah.
specific type of candle. And then in the evening, if I'm relaxing and in a different space, I'll light a different candle. And it
Because
signifies.
Arquiste does home fragrance as well, doesn't it? There's some
Yes.
beautiful
So
Arquiste
so
candles.
that's also like another big part of like evaluation for me is like, and candles are very complex and very difficult, I have to
Mm.
say. It's a shame that sometimes we burn them and of course they disappear faster than a fragrance, but they're almost more work than a perfume, I can tell you.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot. How difficult it is to get the
The
obviously
wax.
to get the ingredients you want right, but yeah, to get the wax to burn at a sort of
Right.
level amount, and yeah, and
And you
certain
might have
certain oils would make it work, make it more
exactly
combustible and all sorts of things.
right, burn cleaner or not, or like
Yeah,
pooling or not pooling, and the throw. I mean, there's a lot of lingo out there, a lot of
quite technical, isn't it? With a
it's
can.
very, very technical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you for running me through. It's really interesting to hear your relationship with fragrance and those various products. And let's dip back into Arquiste. And I suppose for people that don't know the brand, I mean, how would you, if there was someone that was unfamiliar with the world of Arquiste, how would you describe the brand? Is there some sort of feeling that you're trying to put across? Is there a kind of brand
Yeah, I would say
idea?
it's like I'll call it olfactive restoration
Right.
or adaptive reuse of like fragrance stories.
Love it. Love it.
We take these sort of like this research into the past, into specific moments, into specific landscapes, uh, even archaeological or construction sites or historical sites, of course. and we take all of the notes from the land, the landscape, the plants, the cosmetic history, the who, the what, and when, and where,
Mm.
and then all of that becomes like information for our fragrance formula. And then we work with really fantastic perfumers like Rodrigo Flores Roux and Jan Vanier and Khalees Becker,
Yeah.
and they bring the technical expertise and also the wearability to this research.
Right.
They are able to turn this into from a research project into wearable art.
Yeah.
So I would say it's like where I mean, I want to believe it's wearable art. I want to believe that there is um, that all the storytelling and all the research and all the background that we do to make sure that these fragrances speak and they like tell you an interesting story really do deliver that. So you're
Mm.
gonna get like a good quality juice, but at the same time you're gonna have a lot of depth and anecdote and just interest behind the formula.
Yeah. The sort of narrative behind it, but it is interesting, isn't it? I suppose, as you touched on there, there's this in-depth research, and you're working with these incredible perfumers. But I suppose at the end of the day, if someone was to walk into a store or order from your website and they just loved, they fell in love with a certain fragrance and were kind of blind to the rest of the story, kind of that's okay too, isn't it? People can kind of
Yeah,
experience fragrance in whatever way they want, and
yeah,
I suppose just to say that I can tell you for sure the fragrances are incredible, and I'm someone that I like the context and I like to know the backstory, and that sort of enriches the experience for me. But I guess not everyone's like that, and that's fine too, isn't it?
yeah,
If you just fall in love with a fragrance because you think it smells incredible on you, then more power to you. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. There's
yeah,
different
different
layers
ways
of
of,
involvement, let's
yeah,
say, and you
yeah,
can like pick and choose how much you want to involve yourself, how much
of
you want to
course,
find out about this, and that's okay. That's something that I also like I needed to understand as a founder, that I needed to know not everyone is going to be interested in the history
yeah,
same way that I am, or that for some people, so basically all the parts need to make sense. The person who picks up the bottle because they love the packaging, the person who picks up the bottle because they love the scent, or the person who like picks up the bottle because they love the story,
yeah,
and hopefully all of them are satisfied in that their original interest, but then it's complemented by the other parts also working well.
yeah. And I
um,
guess you can feel comfortable that regardless, the work has been done in all those different areas. So if you did want to explore more about the historical narrative behind it, you can do that. If you're enjoying the aesthetics in the bottle, or
yeah,
or if simply you as you say, you're enjoying the juice because it smells mighty fine. That's it's all
but
good, isn't it? And it,
that's why we also included like a bibliography tab on every fragrance page, so that if people have the interest of learning more about that particular fragrance or that particular era, or just about perfume history, um, they can go to those sources and
mm,
like keep exploring, keep learning.
yeah, it's like
I do
further
think that
reading.
also, there's a lot more, I think, you know, especially in the world we live in now, like also being so digital and everything, there's a real sense of like wanting to anchor things down with history. I
Mm,
do think that it's like timely, to think about like why there's like a big pull of like nostalgia, why there's like a
mm,
lot of like historicist stuff happening. I think we are in these a similar time of like flux and evolution where like people are trying to make sense of like the present, and
yeah,
um, there's an interest in the past as well.
yeah. That's fascinating, and yeah, this sense of rootlessness, almost you trying to find those anchors from other
Yeah,
eras, maybe. Yeah.
and I think fragrance allows us for that. It's a product, it's a wearable product, but it has a connection to the land, it has a connection to agriculture and to crops and
Mm,
to nature
yeah.
and to the efficient and responsible harvesting in nature. It has a relation to culture. It has
Mm,
there's a cultural connection to it. There's a specificity of what fragrances come from what areas and what is culturally significant or
yeah.
emotional to certain cultures. Um, and So it has content, it has storytelling
Yeah.
already. So I
If
think
you
it's
want it,
like,
it's there, isn't it?
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Much more
Yeah.
than, let's say, another beauty product that is just color.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And in terms of the Arquiste range, I say I was lucky enough to experience some of the new ones earlier this year. It'd be
Yeah,
great to find out a bit of about what's coming up and what might hit the stores all
right.
around the world, but certainly here in the UK and in the spring and onwards.
Yeah, well, in this summer, around June, we're gonna have two fragrances that are launching in the UK.
Right.
Um, and they're both going to take you to the Adriatic, but
Oh
on
wow.
opposite sides. One
Yeah.
is going to be centered on Venice, and the other one's going to be centered on the Croatian coastline, one of the Croatian islands that's close to Dubrovnik. And these are
Amazing.
both places that I've spent a bit of time in, and that I've just been really fascinated by the history, and learn a little bit more about them, had a bit more access, and they're also places that have a lot to say in terms of like olfactive history.
Right.
The Croatian side, just because, of course, like the bounty of nature and how aromatic it
Yeah.
is to
Yeah.
begin
Yeah.
with. You can imagine all the ingredients. And then on Venice, like there's a real like perfume history in Venice. Like
Totally.
a lot has happened there, and a lot has been created, being this sort of crossroads between East and West,
And all
and
the
this
trade
center of
routes and everything. Yeah.
trade and commerce,
Mm.
exactly. And then like a really fashionable kind of town where, you know, people have always spent a lot of money and gone dressed to the nines, and so there's a lot of cosmetic history there.
Mm.
So they're very interesting fingers. They're also really, again, the nerdy part of me loves like all this historic background, but then the fragrance lover just indulges in how fantastic they are
How
and
good
how
they are.
good they smell like by themselves.
Yeah.
And and then the nice thing about them too is like, again, we're talking about history, but then they will connect with a particular memory of yours from your own life. And I
Mm.
think that's also like one of the goals with Arquiste is like, if we can link our own life and our own experience with this more like grand global history, and kind of like bring a little bit of that romance or that sort of like gravitas into our own life. And on the other hand, like making it part of our own memory, it gives relevance to that story.
Yeah.
It makes it important,
Yeah.
We visit historic sites because we honor them in the past, but we also create new memories for our own lives. When
Yeah.
we went to Rome for the first time,
Yeah.
or when you went to Mexico for the first time, or your first trip to London, you know, they become important markers in your
Yeah.
own
You
life.
bring something of
Um,
yourself. Yeah.
so that's like really something really fun about perfume. I mean, we're talking in these two stories, we're talking about this like ancient history, but then it also has to do with like summer holidays
Yeah.
and Mediterranean and the Adriatic,
Yeah.
or
Which
like
will be subjective in themselves, won't they? It'll be my
subjective and
experiences.
personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
another
something
thing
really fun.
people might not know about the work you do at Arquiste is you also develop fragrances and fragrance products for other brands. And I know you've done some work with Trudon and J. Crew and the St. Regis Hotel and Resorts. I'd love to
Yeah.
know a little bit more about that work because I imagine the impetus is slightly different, isn't it? That you're not the sort of final arbiter, maybe of the final product, and you've got to kind of interpret something for a brand. And do you find that work is that a sort of interesting part of what you do?
Very.
To have a brief, I
It's
suppose, isn't it?
nice. It's nice to be liberated a little bit from the final decision. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
It's nice to give the opinion. Of course, I'm guiding the process. I'm working with the perfumer closely. In a way, in this case, I'm like an evaluator of sorts.
yeah,
So I become
yeah,
their evaluator. I'm interpreting, and I'm like translating what the perfumer is saying and doing, and explaining it to the client in more sort of easy to digest
layman's
terms,
terms. Yeah,
layman's
yeah,
terms. And and then I'm also guiding them a little bit, like, you don't want to you do this, or and give them a little bit more expertise in the market. A lot of the brands that I've worked with, they might be very recognized and important brands in their fields, but fragrance is a completely new thing for them.
yeah, Yeah.
So we make a little bit of an assessment. Okay, how do you want to launch this? Where are you going to launch this? Is this going to be a niche product, a more
Mm.
sort of like author driven product, or is this going to be a wider thing for you? Um, the other thing that they're the reason I think why we've been they've reached out to us and everything is like the storytelling aspect. I
Yeah.
mean, St. Regis basically came and said, "We want you to like research the St. Regis history, and from our history, we want you to take a moment and take a place and something to recreate it, to tell the story of it, to bring it like forward, bring it to the present." Um, so that's something that I think they've like looked for Arquiste and for me for.
I
Um,
totally get that because I think you're bringing. It's not just saying, yeah, this is a brand and it should smell like this. There's real context and yeah, historical information that kind of underpins all that, isn't there?
yeah,
So I can totally see that. What
and
did
it's
you do
really
for
fun.
J Crew? Did you do was it a fragrance for J Crew?
We did two fragrances for J
Yeah.
Crew. They were a pair. They were both. It needed to be a New York story
Hmm.
because J Crew is based in New York, of course.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't necessarily have like this like grand history. J Crew. It started as a catalog company, but I found this obviously, and at the time it was being led by Jenna Lyons, which was like like a personality in design and this incredible like feminine, just woman, strong woman leading the brand. And I thought about another like strong woman in the art world in New York, and it was Peggy Guggenheim. And
Oh
one of
right.
the
Yeah.
designers for J. Crew was basically working on a collection that was inspired by Fortuny fabrics and Venice and Vienna in the secession in the turn of the century, like sort of like Art Nouveau period. And so Venice and then New York and the art world made me think of Peggy Guggenheim.
Right.
And so I researched a little bit more about her life, and I found that she had a gallery in here in Midtown in New York that was called Art of the Century.
Stuff.
So we created two fragrances based on this art gallery, and she had an art gallery that started in like the 40s, around the time that like a lot of artists were coming to America, escaping the war in Europe.
Mm.
And she actually hosted the first all exhibition by all women artists, at least in the United States. I
Right.
believe in the world, but like
Yeah.
definitely in the 20th century in the United States. And it was called Exhibition by 31 Women. And I got a lot of information also on, for example, not only the fragrances that Peggy Winheim would wear, but also the drinks she would drink. Like
Mm.
the types of like parties that were hosted for these like art exhibits. And then the gallery was actually very unique because it was designed by this a designer, by this architect that had these curved wooden walls from which like all the surrealist paintings would hang in a very kind of like
Oh
interesting
wow.
way. So it had a very specific design.
Mm.
And all of these like curved wooden walls inspired the woody background of one of the fragrances.
Right.
One of the fragrances was inspired by the gallery, and it was uh, wood, oak, cedar wood, whiskey, cinnamon, and a touch of vanilla.
That sounds good.
And the whiskey was because that was her preferred drink.
Mm.
And then the other fragrance 31 was centered more on like the women artist and the exhibition, and it was more of like a composite of cocktails from the 40s and
Gotcha.
perfumes from the 40s. So it had notes of plum, of rose, but also a red vermouth accord, which was really interesting.
Right.
And they were
God,
created by Jan and Rodrigo together.
were they?
Yeah,
God, there's certainly again, it's really interesting to hear about that because there's yeah, so much has gone into it and so much sort of research and
yeah,
I'm sure the brands appreciated it. But yeah, a very different role for you to kind of sit in the middle between the perfumer and the
yeah,
brand and have to kind of deliver something a sort of end product.
right.
Yeah.
And it's fun also to sort of like think of stories that might not necessarily be our key stories.
Yeah. Might not
Yeah,
fit the brand necessarily.
there's another brand that I work with that is here in the States called Vacation, and it's a sunscreen brand, but also their claim is to be the world's best-selling sunscreen. So then we convinced them to also launch the perfumes around it.
Ah,
So there's a fragrance, there's an eau de toilette, and then you have the sunscreen and oils and all these like ancillaries. And then we just launched another one called After Sun, that is the scent relates to the After Sun gel
right.
that
So
you wear.
is the main fragrance smelling of sun cream, effectively?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's completely like it's the scent of the sunscreen.
love
It's
it.
like a coconut, banana, pineapple, tropical dream, and then
Nice.
the After Sun one is like a cucumber, aloe,
More soothing.
melon,
Yeah,
kind of soothing gin and tonic in hand kind of story.
love it.
And they're very fun, playful, quirky scents, and they're perhaps like things that like would maybe not be right for like Arquiste, but like
Yeah,
they're still really fun to develop
yeah. It
and
kind
to
of
think
gives
of
you a
that.
different sort of play, different sandbox to play in, I suppose, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Well, look, the name of the podcast is Man in the Mirror, and I'm always really interested in the guest's view of themselves and self image. So I wonder with you, Carlos,
Yeah.
how do you, when you're getting ready in the morning and having your coffee and
Yeah.
chatting to tweets or whatever, what do you, where are you in terms of sort of life stage and how you feel about your appearance? Are you comfortable with what you see?
Right. Well, I think, I mean, I'm going to be very transparent here, but, I think there was a big shift and a big change for me when I decided to like buzz my hair off.
Right.
Um, that happened a few years ago. That was in 2016. So it's already been like, 8 years now.
Yeah.
But I have to say, it's taken me a while to truly come to terms with it. Um, that was like the big kind of like change for me.
Mm.
It is a very
It's
abrupt,
a it's a
very
big deal though, isn't it?
it's
A
a
man and
very
his
big
hair, and I
deal,
get that.
yeah.
I'm
And
thinner.
it's
Yeah.
something that even now when I because it's almost sort of like, even if I were to, and this is also a little strange, and this is like something about social media that is a little strange for me, but if I decide to post a picture on social media of me 9 years ago and I have
Mm.
a full head of hair, obviously the people that don't know me, or people that know me from the last like 4 or 5 years, they're completely sort of like, oh, who is this person?
Yeah.
and and it's almost sort of like you have to explain yourself, like, oh no, that's me 8 years ago,
Still
that's
me.
still very me. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's almost like how I still see myself,
And what
you
was
don't.
happening, Carlos? Was it sort of was it thinning or was it going back? Or
Yes,
why did you
I
make the decision?
it had been thinning for a while, and was
Yeah.
just controlling it in a way where like it just, you know it looked fine, but I was not fine with it.
Yeah.
And so at some point I just decided, okay, this is like done. I don't want to have this control my life. I
Mm.
don't want to, if I was taking the steps that I needed to take to like prevent it from thinning further, but like maybe what I had not done in the past had like, you know, was starting to show, let's say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I didn't take the right like medication for it when I maybe should have started. I didn't wasn't aware of it, and I just like started losing it. So then I thought I need to like change that.
But
Um,
it's a sort of difficult thing to sort of battle. In the end, you're gonna. It's quite difficult to win that particular race, isn't it?
yeah,
I guess you do have to make a decision. Either some people get into transplants or other
right.
things, but I think I think it really suits you. And do you feel?
Thank
Are
you.
you comfortable with? Do you, are you? Does it
Yeah,
feel you now? Are you happy with what
I think
your
so too.
head?
And I finally had another appointment with a surgeon to just understand if there was any room for a transplant.
Hmm.
And we came to the decision that no, this is it. This is where I'm
Yeah,
staying. And I've made peace with that, I think.
I think it's a
But I
good
think
look.
that's definitely a big deal. Again, like it's definitely become, it's like a before and an after of
Yeah.
like, what I look like, where I am in life. Um, and
You
yeah,
strike
at
me
the
as
end,
someone that looks after themselves, though. You work out and stuff. You're
yes,
in good shape by the look of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely look after myself. I don't. want to overdo it. I don't want to necessarily become a vain person and be too
Mm.
focused on that. But I
But you
do
like the
think
healthy aspect of it.
it keeps me sane. It keeps me. I like the healthy aspect of it. It also, like, working out is a sort of like a meditation in a way of like
Yeah.
disconnecting and getting my body to sweat and to just focus on other stuff. Have a little bit of a break
Mm.
from my head in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You kind of
but
have to focus on that thing, don't you? You can forget other stuff and just focus on the
yeah,
task. Or yeah.
yeah. And I don't know. I think, like, we go through life, and it's interesting. Sort of like your 20s and your 30s, they kind of like just all like glide by, and
Yeah.
you don't necessarily notice that much change while you're in the thick of it. And then
Mm.
suddenly, I think you arrive at your 40s, and the changes are like a little bit more like sharper. They're a bit like
Yeah.
more noticeable,
Yeah.
and I think we all have to come to terms with it. We have to make peace with it. It's a life well lived, and
Exactly.
I'm
Exactly.
very grateful for the life I've lived so far, and I hope that there's a lot, many more years ahead. Um, so I just need to take care of myself. I need to
Yeah.
take care of myself so that to make sure that I'm around
Yeah.
long.
Well, I mean, it
And
strikes
apart
me
from
that
that,
you have a very sort of healthy way of looking at it, and I think that obviously people make various decisions, and there's no judgment on on what
yeah,
path people take. But I think yeah, you sound like you're in a good space, and looking after yourself in the right way.
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. Definitely more white hairs over here.
Oh, Carlos,
Uh,
tell me about it, my friend. Yeah. And look, finally, what are the things that bring you joy, Carlos? What makes you happy?
Travel makes me incredibly happy.
Yeah.
Um, I just the little things of chorizo, our dog,
Yeah.
just like the comfort of home and your partner and your family. I think is something that brings me a lot of joy.
Mm.
Um,
I suppose there's
just
that nice sort of contrast there of enjoying travel
yeah,
and having the opportunity to do that, but then the pleasure of and the serenity of sort of come returning home afterwards.
returning home and finding a
Mm.
lot of comfort and protection in the unit, in like
Yeah,
almost like the family unit.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
I'm very, very grateful for that. um, Health, that I'm also quite grateful, and just like to make sure that my family is healthy, that my parents are
mm,
healthy, that my siblings and everyone is like okay. That brings me a lot of joy.
yeah,
um, and then I think art in general and architecture. I think that also goes with travel, like seeing all these, like having moments to be able to sort of like, even if it's like a business trip, making some time to go to a gallery, to go to a museum,
yeah,
to see an historic building, and to just see the beautiful things that like humans can create and do,
mm,
and how sublime that can be. I think that gives me a lot of like joy and a lot of faith that, especially with the world we're living in, like it's not all hardship, it's not
no,
all negativity, and that there is a lot to be grateful and a lot to be hopeful for. um
totally. And I love that you make time to do that on your trips. I guess if you can, if you're allowed to make your own schedule, but it makes a lot of sense to sort of build in some time to enrich your life and see some of those buildings and places that are important to you. That's great.
yeah, just to be very observant and be to
Mm,
take things in. I
yeah,
mean, I love that when I travel, and I love, art is very important, but even like taking the moment to like, I love taking myself out to dinner when I travel
yeah. Just
by
go on your
myself,
own. Yeah.
just observing and appreciating the food and appreciating the service and like the
Mm,
attention and the surroundings, and just receiving that. I think like life is about experiences.
yeah.
So the more I can experience, the more like it's a life well lived for me, and more like it makes sense, and it's worth something. I
Mm. It's lovely to hear that because I think you almost it can be quite easy to do the opposite of that a lot of the time. Now, when you can kind of shut yourself off by staring at your phone or having headphones on and kind of insulating yourself and isolating yourself from a place or an experience, when actually the opposite of that is the thing that can bring us connection and joy
Yeah,
and make us feel much more fulfilled. It was depresses me sometimes, when I sit on the tube in London or on a train and just everyone's. I mean, it's nothing new in this, is there? But you can be closed off from everybody because no one's making eye contact. Heads are down, headphones are
yeah.
on, and we lose the joy of those real connections and sort of taking a moment to look around at things and take it in. It's really important, isn't it? I think.
I think so. I think something needs to happen where we kind of like snap out a little bit of like the social media obsession and
Yeah,
the like you're saying, sort of like this tunnel vision
yeah.
that we're living our life
We've
in.
become in our own little world, aren't we? I think.
Yeah, I don't
Mm.
know if it's also maybe age, and at a certain point, like people age out of that, and
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
but but we also have to be grateful for it. And I mean, I think like it's like we're doing this, and people are going to be listening to this podcast, or maybe on the tube, or maybe on their
that's
commute,
true.
or
Yeah,
something
they're
else.
allowed to listen to this.
We're I need to be grateful that like there's all these like platforms and
Yeah,
ways
that's
that
true.
we can interact with each other even without ever meeting, and that's important too.
Mm,
But yeah, just to go out, like be aware, like find the art close to you, find a museum, find a gallery, find a corner of your neighborhood that is inspiring. And I
mm.
think take the moment to appreciate that.
Oh,
I think
Carlos,
that's
I mean,
really
you've been really
important.
inspiring, and it's been a real pleasure to
Thank you.
find out more about you and your world, and how fragrance is part of the wider universe for you of art and history and architecture and so many other things, and of course the background in different countries. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm going to put links to some of the products and where people can find out more about Arquiste and some of the new releases that are coming up. But of course, things like Lord de Louis, which is out now and absolutely beautiful, and of course where they can find
Thank you.
them all over the place. Certainly here in the UK at on Fiole and Liberty and Bloom, I think.
Liberty and
Yeah,
Bloom and Soliflor in Brighton.
perfect. Well,
Yes.
thank you for your time. Thank you for making some time for me this morning, and
Thank you,
please
Hayden.
thank Chorizo as well.
I will.
It was
He's
lovely
been
to
a good,
see you.
he's been a
And
good buddy. There we go.
yay, there she is. He is. It's a he, isn't it?
It's a he, yeah.
It's a he. I was misgendering him there.
No, no worries. I don't think he minds that.
Thank you. Have a good day, and so lovely to speak to you. And I hope to see you again soon.
Likewise. Thank you, Hayden.
Thanks,
Have a
Carlos.
great one. Bye bye.